Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph. It is indeed a privilege and a pleasure to be here at the Marabella Open Bible Church this morning. You know, when Dr. Joseph got in touch with me, I was so flabbergasted that he would even ask me to share. And I said to him, I am not a preacher. And he said, well, just share. And as I listened to those who have shared here, the ladies who have given their story, I believe I have a story. I believe the Lord has deposited a lot into me, and sometimes, you know, we could easily make excuses, especially when it is before a crowd or it's not a situation that is you're accustomed to. It takes you out of your comfort zone. And even though it may appear that way, I consider it a real privilege to be with you. So happy Mother's Day to all you wonderful mothers. It was so lovely hearing those stories and seeing the drama, you know, depict what you did that so beautifully, and I really enjoyed that. It was wonderful just coming into this environment and feeling the warmth. I was looking for a car park, and as soon as I said to the car park attendant, you know, I'm here and I'm going to share, he immediately, you know, ushered me to where I needed to park and helped me. And that means a lot, you know, first impressions, especially, you know, you're driving down here alone, you're not sure where you're going, and, you know, reversing is not always the best part of some of us ladies. So, you know, I felt that warmth, and as I walked into the church, I felt it. And it is so important to exhibit warmth and friendliness, not only among ourselves whom we know, you know, we tend to stick to those we know, but I felt it here, and I said, I want to commend you for what you're doing, and do keep that up. Because that is what, you know, those looking for a church, those looking for love, those who are looking for acceptance, those are the kinds of things that will make an impression. I remember we had an ushers training not too long ago, maybe last year, and then a refresher with Reverend Ken Jacob, who is really versed in that area. And I remember he mentioned it takes about 11 seconds for you to make a first impression, and if someone is going to come back to your place. And that stuck with me, you know, and it starts with a car park. It starts with just finding directions to come here. And I appreciate the calls and follow-up, and, you know, that's special. But what was even more special, too, here it is, this Mr. Bisoon, Brother Bisoon came to me, and he said, you know, I am so-and-so. He introduced himself, and he said, I was at Rescue Mission. Now, Rescue Mission is a faith-based organization that was started by my husband and his first wife. Now, don't let your alarm bells go up. Why is it he married a second time? But rest assured, I'll tell you the story. But they started that NGO, Rescue Mission, in 1986 to help recovering substance abusers. We had the in-house program, and you know what? The theme was building strong families. I mean, I say it's so ironic that that's the theme we carried for years. But then we added the HIV aspect to Rescue Mission, and, you know, some felt we needed to change our vision a bit. But then, in our last AGM a few weeks ago, we decided to go back to building strong families, because there is where it is at, building strong families. And it is great to hear the testimony or meet someone who have gone through the program, because sometimes, you know, you invest in a work, and especially when it deals with substance abuse and HIV and AIDS, and you don't know the result. And it's good to know that there's someone here in this church. He told me, what, it's 21 years you were here, and that's how long ago you were at Rescue Mission. And so you are a success story, and it encourages me, and it encourages us as Rescue Mission to continue in our mission. Now, we started with substance abuse because of that need to reach out to families who are traumatized, families who are divided as a result of substance abuse. And we had an in-house program. Unfortunately, we had to close that program because of many reasons, and we weren't squatting property, so we had to give it up. Unfortunately, it's still there, abandoned, even though we had to give it up. But in the process, we added HIV and AIDS, because there was a problem too with substance abusers, that because of that addiction, there was that openness for other kinds of addictions and other kinds of issues. And so the correlation between HIV and AIDS and substance abuse were so interrelated. And with me coming on the scene in 1991, I, without hesitation, introduced that part of the mission. Now we are feeling like, I'm feeling a shift, or we are feeling a shift. And it is because of what is happening with this LGBT move. We as a church need to be prepared. For so long, just like with HIV and with substance abuse, we had that hands-off kind of an attitude. Some with open arms and welcome. But, we are seeing that area of same-sex attractions. And we, as a church, need to respond, because the reality is there is an open field for ministry. And we'll see, where, like substance abuse, like the HIV ministry, this is an area that we are seriously looking at in providing that security, in providing that sanctuary for those who are struggling, and for also teaching our children. And if you've been following what has been happening in the news, things are happening fast and furious with our families, that the whole family, the definition of family is being redefined. And it just sounds so unbelievable that even such intelligent people would believe that you can have any, it's over 60 or 50 genders. If you check it on Google, that there are, God made male and female. And it has become so confusing. And the target is not just the older ones and the general population, but our children and those who are going through tertiary education, secondary school education, where you're forced into a thinking that this is normal. But we have to understand that God created family. He distinctly made male and female, no in-betweens, no transformation after we have been designated the male or female gender. Going back just for clarity, wondering how I am a second wife to Bishop Hazrat Ali. Well, I knew him, and we are talking family, and maybe there's someone here who could identify with parts of my story. Now, I grew up in Gasparillo, and Marabella is like a second home for me. In fact, my mother was like a Proverb 31 woman. My uncle and his family migrated to Canada in the 60s, so she bought that house opposite the police station. She rented it for many years. Unfortunately, after she passed away and handed it down to my brother, he did not make much good of it, more than it stood there for many years before it was sold to someone else. And I remember growing up and coming to this area and spending holidays, vacation time. And so Marabella is very close to me. So growing up in Gasparillo, there's where I first met my husband at the Gasparillo Pentecostal Church. And we were teenagers there, and he was always very prim and proper and acted beyond his age. Although he's a teenager at the time, he conducted himself in such a manner that, even as young ladies, you wouldn't dare think of, oh, that's a nice guy. And my mother was very strict. I know it was, is it Ali? No, not Ali. Alyssa, yes, who shared, right. My mother was a real disciplinarian, and I used to be really upset with her, how strict she was. But she did some amazing things in her lifetime that I could only say she's the epitome of a Proverb 31 woman. And she grew us up in the Christian ways. We could say we have studies to do or other things to do. She would make sure we are going to have devotions now. And back then, she would read the daily bread and have us pray. But when she started to pray, even to bless the meal, some of you have mothers like that, you know, she would pray for the whole world before she finished bless the meal. You know, she was a praying woman. In the church, she was from one of those original members, those early members of the Gasparilla Presbyterian Church. At that time, there were no Pentecostal churches around. And she had a testimony of healing and deliverance. And she said after she got married, because of, you know, jealousy and whatever else, another woman on the scene, something was, you know, some witchcraft was done. And she became very sick and went to the seer woman, the seer man, the pundit, the mount, wherever she could have sought help, she did. And didn't get the help. But then she heard about Jesus. Now, she grew up as a Hindu. My father was Presbyterian. And she heard that voice of Jesus saying to her that he is her healer. And revealed himself to her. And the church she knew about in Gasparilla at that time was the Gasparilla Presbyterian Church. And there is where she was nurtured. But then when the Pentecostal came later on, they felt you could not serve two masters. In fact, the preacher used to say that. So my mother was very active in the Presbyterian Church. She served as an elder. She was the keyboardist. She learned music in her 30s. And even then, my father used to say, where is this old lady going to study music? And she was then in her 30s. But she became the organist in the church. She had this car, an Opel, and then she had a Kingswood. And she used to pack children in her vehicle and take them to Sunday school from all over there in Gasparilla. She taught them the Word of God. And the ladies, she will do the same and started a women's ministry and imparted to them. I remember on a Sunday, she would come to Marabella Market, and just when they're selling out things, she would just buy up a lot of stuff and give it to people. You know, and even in growing up, she was a seamstress. She sold for people and got her money. We had land, so she planted it up together with my father, sold the produce, started a parlor, then had a shop, and then bought property. So apart from that one in Marabella, she had in Gasparilla, and bless her, she has passed away 12 years now, and she's left an inheritance for her children. But she shows a good example, an excellent example. Now, going back to my husband, I met him at a Gasparilla Pentecostal church. And in 1970, I left Trinidad and went to England to study nursing. In 1969, 67, I think it was. Yeah, 67. He left with some other guys from the Gasparilla Pentecostal Church. About 5 of them in that year went to Bible schools. And in 1970, he graduated, went to Tobago, and that was his first pastoral assignment. And he said, I remember he shared that he went all over Tobago spreading the Word of God and preached. And there is where he met his wife. And her mother is from Trinidad. Her father, I don't think she knew much about her father, but the mother migrated to Tobago because of abuse, domestic abuse. And then this child, when she went there, this was her last daughter that she was pregnant with. And so she grew up there in Tobago, and my husband met her, and he married her. And as he would describe it, after 17 and a half years of heaven and earth, she passed away. It was a short period of illness. She had cancer, and within 3 months, she passed away. And he felt that he will never remarry. And maybe there are people here who feel like you've lost a spouse and you'd never remarry. And that was his promise to even this person who had passed away, and it meant so much to him. Now, I was living abroad in America at that time, and I was still single and disengaged, and I came here to my brother's wedding in 1990 and met him, and we reconnected, and he was single. And after a short courtship, when you're older and you know what you're about, why wait? So we got married in 1991 in August. But it took me 16 months before I moved back here because I was very much settled, living in Fort Lauderdale, working as an administrative assistant at a hospital, and worked for a lot of money and had my freedom, had my own home, and had everything that I wanted. And that was a major decision for me. And I really had to pray and ask my mother to pray for me. And my mother was very excited because, you know, here is this daughter who should be married and have children already, and you know, meeting this guy that she's known from practically all of his life, growing up in the church there. And she was very encouraging. But God answered prayer, and He worked things out that after that period, I came back to Trinidad. But in the meantime, I thought, what could I get involved in before coming back to Trinidad? And HIV and AIDS was so rampant, and it was like so many young people were coming into the hospital, and in a short space of time, they were dying. So way back in the 1980s, when I migrated to the US from England, there were cases of this gay disease, and we did not know much about. And it was around, 1983 when this virus was discovered, and it was even called GRIDS, a gay-related immunodeficiency disease then, only to realize it was spread primarily, the virus was spread primarily through homosexuality. And then, it soon spread to the heterosexual population. And so we were seeing all these mystery cases in the hospital. And working there, I was really troubled seeing young people coming into the hospital and dying as a result of this disease. And when the virus was identified, there were medications later on to help to alleviate the symptoms. So I felt, coming back here, the Caribbean was said to have the second highest incidence of HIV and AIDS. And what better field to get into and make a difference? So Rescue Mission automatically provided that platform. Also with my husband being involved in, as a pastor, and was then the superintendent of the church and had, leadership roles in the island, we capitalized on that influence and went to churches up and down this island, Trinidad, Tobago, the Caribbean, and enlightened the church. It seemed like if I'd been here to this church many years ago, but it seemed like it was very different. I just don't remember. But anywhere a door was open, we will go and enlighten the congregation. Because there was that opportunity to bring hope and also to help people with their choices, that abstinence was better. Now abstinence has become a curse word. You can't even use that word. You say delay sexual activity or risk avoidance. There are different words that are being used now. And infidelity is still very common. And so we had to share those risks. And so, the churches opened their doors and we were able to share on this HIV and provide up until this day counseling for persons living with HIV. In the process, though, after the Buggery law, was heard in court, I reflected on a number of things to the point where I feel angry inside. And I'm just sharing as a mother and as an activist and as a church member and as a Christian. I saw the progression of the gay agenda. In the States and in the UK, a lot of the male nurses, the respiratory therapists, a lot of the male staff were gays. And I was accustomed to it. So you accept it as a way of life, and you learn to relate to people with respect and dignity without discriminating. Now, why I'm angry is those two words, or some of the words that have evolved to bring us where we are, and are realizing that it would have had this negative impact, to the point when I say stigma and discrimination, a whole different agenda comes before my eyes. And that was the agenda back then, that we stigmatize, we discriminate. And it's true, we did. But then look where it has taken. It has drawn a population that were seemingly marginalized, marginalized, and where it is today. So the vocabulary of inclusion, of tolerance, of multiculturalism, even a rainbow, which is considered so beautiful, has now conjured, taken on a different meaning. When we used to talk about prostitution, then it became commercial sex workers. Now it's social hostess, and now it's become key population and different things. And we are seeing that this is what is being taught to us. We used it, and yes, it sounds very logical, but then in the end, when it became so corrupt and so overt, you really say, okay, did I get caught? Sometimes I feel like that, and I really need to get over that. But it is how, we were used through the system. I was glad to be a part of many of the meetings, because immediately I joined the National AIDS Program, then it evolved into the National AIDS Coordinating Committee, and, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Social Development. So connecting with these different ministries gave an opportunity to work with the general population, and especially what is now described as a key population. That is the gays, the lesbians, the homosexuals, the sex workers, and those living with HIV, and the list can go on. And it gave me a keen insight as to what was happening. And sometimes it was just so unbelievable to sit around those tables and I hear the discussion and see the agenda that were promoted. And I say all of that to say, God gives you an experience. He uproots you from where you are and take you to a different place, and for a season, for a reason. So going back to my husband's situation, I've heard people who said that they have lost a spouse and they will never remarry. Listen, he's having a fulfilled life, and together in ministry we enhance each other. I am not a preacher in the church, but I'm the administrator. I love administration. It comes naturally for me. So I like the engine room. So something like this, you make me feel comfortable though, and I feel comfortable sharing with you. And I know God has made deposits into each one of our lives so that we can share with others to be a blessing. We are not here for our own comfort. And so when Dr. Joseph asked me to share, I said, I know it's Mother's Day, but then I am in Evangel Temple all these years. And what about being a blessing for a different group of people? What about coming out of a comfort zone? And oftentimes we have to will ourselves from where we are comfortable and do the uncomfortable and be open to that. And so I know I prepared something to share with you, and I would really love to do that. The topic that I was asked to share on is how to be a godly wife and mother. Okay, another part to my story is I inherited 2 teenage sons when we got married. One was 13 and one was 15. Today they're in their 40s. And we have 7 grandchildren. The biggest son has 5 girls, and the second son has 2 girls. And one is 20, and the others range from 2 years to 14 years. We really love them, and they feel like my own grandchildren. So even though, you think that you're not a mother, but you never know the deposits that you make into other people's life, what a blessing it is, of filling that gap. So I'm a second mom, used to say stepmom, but I don't feel like that. I feel like a biological mom to the both boys, but I never try to replace their mom or try to be like her even from the start, because this kind of field was very new to me. Being a nurse and living abroad and then being a pastor's wife was a whole different ball game. So adjustment was very important. So it wasn't easy just adjusting even to that role. However, as What's an Alicia who shared a testimony about her mother. She looks at her grandmother, her grandchildren. You wonder if this is the same mother. And so, I feel so attached to my grandchildren. If two of them could have helped it, they would have come with me this morning. But they went with their dad, and I told them, represent me at Evangel Temple. Another spin to our story, we could be pastors and we could have it all right, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Our second son is divorced for 3 years now, so we become like parents and grandparents to these two children, a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old. Sometimes you just don't have the time or the energy to keep up with their pace, with their studies, with their activities and different things. And so we try our best, but they said we are their parents. That is how they look at us. Because we give them all the love that they need, and it's not easy for children coming from broken home and separated parents. So even there are those here in this audience maybe thinking that, how could I'm not a mother biologically, or I am not a mother to other children. But, there is that need for children to be loved and appreciated and to connect with figures as fathers and mothers. They need to be affirmed. So that's another part that we did not anticipate would happen in our family, but it has happened. It happens to the best of us. We're all human, right? Yes. Okay, so that's my story. So today we are celebrating Mother's Day, and we all know what's the occasion about, and we have these different kinds of mothers. Some of you may not, yeah. A second, you have a slide, please. Right. So there may be persons here who may be longing to have a child and never had a child, or try to adopt, but you were disappointed whether in the way the child was brought up. I remember hearing from a mom, she is in her 40s, and she felt like she was getting old, and decided to adopt this child, but didn't realize that there was a problem with the child, and she had no history of who the parents were. And so she has this child who is dyslexic, and he is autistic, and different challenges. And she's a single mom in a full-time job and having to adjust to that. On the other hand, there are other moms who have adopted children, and it worked out just beautifully. So being an adoptive parent has its role. Then you have those surrogate parents. I remember as a nurse that you would have mothers who were artificially inseminated by the sperm of a father because the wife could not have a child. And so when a child was born, was whisked away and given to those parents. And there were times when even the surrogate mother said, I feel too attached to this child, I don't want to separate, but then it's a legal issue there. And we have so many spiritual mothers in our churches, whether it's the same person around the same age, older, or even younger, but it's the Christian maturity. And as mothers, we can serve that role in our assemblies and in our communities and to others who so need that spiritual impartation. Well, grandmothers, and I know that is there anyone here who would like to have a spiritual grandmother? We say we have, your children have, can adopt parents, but then what about grandmothers? Grandmothers have a special way that they deal with children, that they didn't deal with their own children. So even as grandmothers, don't be afraid to impart to other children, embrace them and show them that love. And as we sit in a congregation like this, there are some of you who may be reflecting on Mother's Day, and it's a happy occasion for some. Some of you would have lost your mothers, and she's left treasured memories. And some of you would not have even known your mother, or she wasn't there for you, or she was unkind, or did not protect you. There is hope. There is a need to release and to move on. And I thought this was interesting, looking at the perspective of motherhood. This book written by these two authors, Lies Young Women Believe, they said that some of the girls or most of the girls interviewed, these are some of the statements they made. Being a wife and mother is not as important to them as having a meaningful career outside of the home. And we see that happening a lot today in life, don't we? Careers have occupied the space of being a homemaker. And it is necessary in many cases, but sometimes it's at the expense of neglecting our family. A statement that was made again too is half of teen girls accept out of wedlock childbearing as a worthwhile lifestyle. Living together is more and more accepted by girls in their demographics, in their age group. And most teenagers report that it is better to live with someone before you get married. We see those kinds of ideologies even in church life. But we as believers, we know that this is not God's standard. And even if you're here and you found yourself in that situation, we know that God has forgiven, He has released, but we can make a difference to the generation that's coming up. A godly mother is one who is described as reverent, holy, God-fearing, and righteous. A woman who has God as the center of her life is a valuable asset to her husband, her children, and the church. Many of us have seen wonderful examples of such women in our mothers, grandmothers, and fellow Christian women. And if you could say amen to that? Amen. Yes. Yes, there's so many who have deposited so much wisdom and sound instruction to us. So we must not let the world influence our ideas and values as it tries to indoctrinate us with a redefinition of family as God created. Now, our sister read from the book of Solomon, and what I prepared, and I'm seeing time's going, but I will not be long, promise you. I know some of you probably have your lunch dates and have your afternoon prepared, but just bear with me as I share a few nuggets from the book of Proverbs chapter 31. Solomon highlights the life of a worthy woman. He identifies a number of important roles for such a woman, including being a good woman, a good wife, a good mother, and a good neighbor. By displaying such roles, a worthy woman will not only benefit those around her, but she will also bring to herself a good name, as we will see. Going back to the book of Proverbs, verse 11, we start with here, and we're looking at some of the attributes of a godly wife and mother. And as was said by our sister, that is what she used as her template, as her hallmark for developing or for the standard by which we should live. I have heard it also said that this proverb woman looked like an abused woman. She has been used, and she didn't have time for herself, and that's not today's woman. But yet, we have to see it as an example for us. We may not fulfill all those qualities, but there are enough qualities for us to glean from. So in verse 11 it says, the heart of a husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. In today's society, we are seeing that mistrust and betrayal and infidelity in relationship. And we are seeing here that attribute of being trustworthy is so important. And it fosters with love and loyalty. And you see what he describes safely. He said he safely trusts her. So he can close his eyes, he can go abroad, he can do whatever, but yet he knows that his wife would always be faithful and there for her. She can be depended on to do what is expected and anticipates the needs and response correctly. So in whole trust, those are important components of being a trustworthy person. She understands her role and functions efficiently to complement her husband. You know, we should not be, as women, duplicates of our spouse, but the qualities that we have are there to enhance. I'm sure with Dr. Joseph and why you have two very different people and you realize how much you just plugged into each other. I'll say the same of couples. So don't say, why can't you be like? But we can see those same qualities as strength to enhance. And to have trust, there must be communication. And proper communication at it, at all levels and in all things. And so, so that quality of trust. So what about a positive influence? The woman, a godly wife is a person of influence. We influence our immediate spheres, our family, our neighborhood, our church, our workplaces, our schools, wherever we are influential. So her verbal and non-verbal words and actions are encouraging and supporting. So a person of influence or a person who is positive will have positive things to say. It wouldn't be, why you do this, why you do that, you're so stupid, and use derogatory statements. That's not affirming. So it must be positive. She's consistent and dependable. For her to be a person of positive influence, she has to be that way and not irrational and jump to conclusions or moody. You don't know when to predict or how to predict her behavior. And you see that she's hearty in her affirmations. And that is what will draw the praise, as we will see in the end. She has good work ethic. In verses 13 and 14 it says she seeks wool and flax and willingly works at her hand. She brings her food from afar. So she uses her initiative. She goes out and make things happen. You know, there's a statement that says some people watch things happen, some people make things happen, and some people say, what happened? So she's one of these make things happen kind of thing. When you make things happen, you become fruitful, you become productive, you see the fruits of your labor. She's diligent in applying herself to the task, as we see in the verses throughout this chapter. And she seeks to get the best even when it's not readily available and accessible. It says she brings fruit from afar. And many of us, like we order things online, we want the best, we go the distance to get the best. She's compassionate. She thinks of the poor. And, you know, in this life, we could be so caught up in our own affairs and feel like we do not have enough money or enough to share. But it doesn't always have to be monetary, and it doesn't have to always be large amounts, but in giving a comforting word, in giving a helping hand, in volunteering service. And more we see even in the churches that volunteerism, I don't know about here, but you're getting less and less people to volunteer to do things. And if they do, it's for a short run many times. And so volunteerism is so important, and it comes with that a spirit of compassion, seeing a need and seeking to meet that need. She's able to plan for the future. In verses 21 and 20, we say she's not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry of herself, and her clothing is fine linen and purple. So she thinks of the future. She plans for the future. She doesn't hope for the best for the future, but she makes intentional plans. And we talked about fine linen and purple. She's a woman of taste. You know, sometimes as women we end up buying a lot of things and then realize if we buy one little thing that is of quality, it looks better, lasts longer, and looks good, right? So she guards her family. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. So we see where she manages the affairs of her household well. And this would involve continually monitoring what is going on, what her children are up to, how is she training her children, how are the financial resources, how are the supplies, how are the stocks and everything else. She's always alert and attentive and keeps herself occupied and think of contingencies. What if something should go wrong? There is a plan in place. So she thinks of her, we see where the priority of her family took precedence. Now we look at, from the attributes, we look at her own identity. She was a self-assured woman. She knew her position with her family and the community. She knew who she was. And sometimes as women, we don't know who we are. We try to imitate others. We try to find our identity in our husbands or in our children fulfilling our dreams. But this woman, she knew her identity, and we as women should be encouraged to know our identity. She earned her respect by demonstrating it. She did not say, but she did. And she trained her children in the ways of the Lord. It says, train up, the book of Proverbs, it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. So if this mother is growing the children up in the ways of the Lord, it is expected that it will be that way. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way, and some of us, I'm sure, have stories about that. It is likely that she would not have shown favoritism, because that could be a conflict in family, and she treated each one with individualism, because sometimes we can say, we can make those comparisons in our family and say, why can't you be like your brother? Or why can't you be like your sister? Or why can't you be like this friend or the neighbor across the road? And that could be very damaging to a child. And so this is understood in the way that she would have brought the children up, that they too would have been self-confident. She took care of her husband. He was known at the gates. It means that he was a man of influence. So she made sure when her husband went out, he didn't go looking all out. Because sometimes, I don't know if you experience this as wives, as mothers, that, your husband is not good at matching his clothes. Anyone? Yeah? So you may go out and see two different color socks, or a color tie that doesn't match the shirt, or the suit, the wrinkles, or the shirt is not ironed, or the hair needs to be combed properly, or need time for a haircut or something like that. So she made sure her husband looked good, and when he looked good to the public as well, and she looked good. So her character qualities attracted praise. She had a relationship with God. In verse 30, and it's coming to a close because we reached to verse 30, it says, charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised. You see, charm and beauty, they are fleeting. They are worthless. And we can't afford to just go for the superficial things in life. But when our hope and our strength and confidence is in God, we have our identity. We have that intimacy with God. We know who we are. We sing that song, I know who I am. That's a testimony for us as individuals, not as women, but men. Men, you were probably feeling left out, but you affirm the woman, and these qualities are also for men, right? Yes. So she had a reverence for God that brought praise. And that is where the secret of our strength as individuals lie. In that hiding place, in that secret place with God. His strength is made perfect in weakness. He is our very present help in time of trouble. We can always call upon him. In him we live, we move, and have our being. This woman has left a legacy. It says, give her the fruit of her hands and let her own works praise her in the gates. So this virtuous woman who trusts in God diligently sought to apply herself in her home, in her community, and she recognized her worth and left a legacy. And that's why it is documented by Solomon. And it's a book and it's a chapter that is quoted so often, and it's an encouragement for all of us. So we don't have to always look and think, okay, well, we don't have wool, we don't have flax. I have a miserable husband and children who are own way. I'm a second mom, or these children are really not my own. I'm just filling in a space until they grow up and can manage for their own. But we have that responsibility. So as we look at this day that we honor women, and as Christian women, we need not look out into the world for role models, but to the Bible and to the church. So when we look at these television characters or the movies or somebody else who's not even a Christian, for us to emulate. But right here within our churches, right here among Christian circles, and right there in the Bible, every type of woman you could think of, It's there in the Bible for us to get encouragement. Are the goals we have for our lives going to hinder our role as godly women, wives, and mothers? If they are, let us refocus and seek to have our priorities right. The rewards will far exceed anything in this life that we can imagine. May we desire to be godly women, a godly wife, a godly mother, to influence lives to Jesus Christ and fulfill our purpose on earth. Ladies, men, children, we all have a role. The older teaching the younger, the men being mentors to the younger men and boys. There is a gap in our family that need to be strengthened. And no matter what is the agenda out there and what are the prevailing circumstances and moves, we have a responsibility to take care of our families. I like what I see here, building a strong family and the pillars that we need to focus on, we need to build on, because these are the building blocks that will make us have wholesome families, strong families that will endure for generations, that we are not easily swayed by popular thinking and belief and agendas and the school system. And as parents, as mothers, as adults, what is happening in our school, with that school curriculum, the comprehensive sex education, it is to really distort our children's thinking. You could see in the television program designed for children and for family how much of those agendas are weaved into it as though it is normal. And we have a serious responsibility as believers to stand up for truth, the truth that is timeless, the truth that is the same yesterday, today, and forever. It never changes. And so we have to be so entrenched, so absorbed in the scriptures and know what the scriptures say for every occasion, so that we will have a word, or that we will have an answer for our defense, that we will know in every situation how to stand up. It says that, as the psalmist David says, your word have I hid in my heart, that I will not sin against you. It's the word, rightly dividing the word, that will keep us in these times that we are living in. And so don't give up on your children. Don't give up on those who grew up in church and are no longer here, or if the children don't want to come to church. Keep praying, keep insisting, and keep showing that unconditional love, because this is what will influence our generation for Christ. So I would really want to encourage you to be strong as women. Dwell on those qualities. Let the Proverb chapter 31 woman be our DNA. And it's never too late to adapt those qualities, to refine those qualities in our lives, and to share with others as we live in this earth, to be ambassadors for Christ. Be the salt of the light, the salt of the earth, and the light of the world. That is what we are. And so, as I wrap up here, maybe there are women here who are going through different struggles. You can't talk to anyone because it hurts so deeply. Or maybe it stems from an early childhood or teenage experience that has really shattered you, and you just can't seem to move on and get beyond that. Or maybe you in a marriage relationship, it's a dead-end relationship, there is infidelity, there is abuse, or the children are going astray, they're not listening. Or there may be some of you who have loved ones that may be living with HIV, or have a drug problem, or have same-sex attraction. Whatever the challenge is, we know that God is a God who answers prayer. And don't give up. Be encouraged. And don't keep things to yourself. Because you're a woman, you're a man, there's a pastor who can help you through these situations. I hear in church live too, you hear some individuals, it's only when they have gotten to rock bottom, or when you don't see them, or you hear about the consequence of what they were going through, and said, I didn't want to tell anybody. But we are one in Christ. We are interconnected. We a one family. And we're talking about building strong family. It's not just, doesn't mean a family living under one roof, but a family of God, the church family. And it's not just within the confine of the Marabella Church, but a church family international, the full church family nationally. There is a cry to build strong families. So let us stand up and stand out for what is right. So as I say, those of you who need prayer, and I can ask Reverend Joseph to come, pray, make this appeal, for those who need prayer in specific areas, or praying for the moms as they celebrate today, that this will be a memorable experience, that this will be a time of encouragement, a time of renewal, a time to say, okay, I'm going to shake off my struggles and move on. And I want to share one quick thing with you. And again, I'm sharing it with you as an encouragement. At the end of 2016, I had an MRI because I felt something was wrong in my left breast. And it was December. I went to get my results. And I walked into that room, and the receptionist said to me, you got a result that yours is the only one. And when I read the report, it said I had cancer. My husband was outside, and she went and called him. And it was really a sobering moment. In fact, the first thing that went through my mind is, is this the way that a person feels when they hear the news that they're HIV positive? And if it is a shattering blow. In January, I went abroad and I had a surgery followed by radiation. And I thank God for a very supportive family. I stayed with my sister in Florida, and I had the best care I could have ever desired. And I will say it is God sustained me. I prayed, I asked God to take that away from me, and I was really believing for a miracle, for the amount of prayers that were prayed. I have a sister there in Florida, in Canada, and every network of prayer on television, anywhere, she sent requests for me to be prayed for. And when I had a repeat mammogram at a hospital there, I was really expecting good news. Thank you. But it was the same. And I said, Lord, whatever this is meant, I know you will take me through. And I thank God again for my sister's church and the church family there. And my sister, both sisters are wonderful Christians, and it's so important to have supportive family and Christian family who would stand with you. And I went through that treatment and just had a lump removed, and everything went well. I remember I finished my radiation treatment on the 28th of April last year, and my husband was going to launch his book, From Islam, My Story from Islam to Christ, on the 30th. So even though I was away, I was arranging things for him, and I said I had to be back home for this launch on the Sunday. And the doctor told me it was no guarantee, because sometimes you may not have your treatment based on how you react or the machines and different things. But everything went to clockwork, and I was able to finish my treatment and get back for the launch. And I was determined to look as happy and as normal and not even talk about this. I don't normally cry. Eh? I don't know why I cried this morning, but maybe if I was at Evangel, I would not have. But I was determined to use the experience positively and not focus on myself, but to make life, every moment count. And I guess that is what motivated me to say yes. Because we don't know how long we have on earth. We don't know when our number may be called, whether we are young or old. But we know that every opportunity we have, we use it to spread the word of God. My follow-up in August went well, but then I had a follow-up in February. And it didn't go as I expected. And I am going back in August for further tests. And please remember me in your prayer. I pray that there is no recurrence. It was diagnosed at an early stage, at 0 to 1 stage. And I feel pretty good. But with medication, you can feel a bit tired. But I say, you know, God has given me that experience that I could share with others, that I could have a new release on life or a new lease on life to say, make every moment matter for God. And so if you're going through some situation in your life with a medical condition, God is in control. He's our healer regardless. Because I feel without prayers and without the encouragement, I would not be looking this way or feeling this way or having the attitude that I have. And I'm determined to have a positive attitude towards everything and not dwell on my past illness. And I hope that there's no recurrence. And that's what I trust God for. So just be encouraged. Be encouraged that whatever experience He's given to you, that He's given to you for a reason. When we pray and He doesn't answer as we would like Him to, still trust Him. Don't get disappointed with God. Don't give up. All right? So be blessed. It was such a pleasure sharing with you this morning. And just keep living for Jesus. Thank you. Thank you so much.